One thing I was not expecting when I was learning about car engines is the difference between dual overhead cam and single overhead cam, and sort of the history of when different companies decided to switch from the pushrod engines to single overhead cam to dual overhead cam. But an even more interesting topic was how far this dates back, that even airplanes during World War I, they had the choice to use pushrod or cam and block or single overhead cam or dual overhead cam, and most of the companies in Europe were actually going with single overhead cam. And I found this really interesting because one of the topics that they discussed why they chose single overhead cam was because of the reliability, meaning when you're in the air, the standards, it has to be 100% success rate. So it is different than cars, where cars have a lot of regulations, and they're mostly fuel economy regulations as well as safety. But with the airplanes, the safety and actually the functionality is actually the most important thing, and also the weight reduction. So the extra performance that you get from a dual overhead cam engine is not great enough to sacrifice the weight savings that you get with the single overhead cam engine. Now, a lot of these planes have what's called a Hispano-Suiza engine, which stands for Spanish and Swiss, but then the engines were actually manufactured in France. And during World War I and World War II, they were pretty much used by a majority of the countries as far as, and even when they were seized, they were used by opposing forces because these were such reliable engines. So I would say if I was going to go with a car, I would stick with single overhead cam, because everything that you read, if you just do a general search, is the reliability outweighs maybe the red line and the high-end performance, because that is really the only advantage. Yes, if you're, let's buying a Mitsubishi Evolution and you're buying it as like a drifting car, you could see why someone would want a dual overhead cam. But if it's for like an everyday passenger use, it has the advantages of the low-end torque, like the push rod and the overhead valve, but then it also has a lot of the mid-range, like you get with a dual overhead cam, but it's also less complicated than the dual overhead cam. And I have a personal experience where I had a dual overhead cam 4-cylinder engine. It was a Nissan. It failed 3 times. They really could do nothing about it. Then I bought a single overhead cam used vehicle, which perception-wise you'd say, oh, this car is going to have, it has no problems. So I think there is some real world examples that single overhead cam is better for reliability. Dual overhead cam is really to meet the gas regulations of these new EPA ratings.